Hey there, welcome to Standard Operating Procedure, the Intellify live broadcast. I'm your host, Russell Lundberg. Thanks for joining us. Every Sunday at 5 p.m. UTC, we go live to help you with tips, tricks, techniques, and tactics to love a career in telecoms. Thanks a lot for being here. I feel a little bit like the new coach of a professional sports team. When the manager, there's a press conference and the manager brings out the new coach and introduces the new coach, and all the reporters say, "Coach, what are you going to do?" And the coach always says, "We're going to work on fundamentals." And I feel like the reason the coaches say that is working on the fundamentals gives you two things. One, it helps you build a team by working together on something. But more importantly, you have to know the fundamentals. You can't do the more sophisticated, the exciting stuff if you have to stop and think about the fundamentals. And it's the same for telecoms, is we need to master the fundamentals so that we can do better telecoms. And I think the fundamentals include things like making reports. All right, so let's get started. Can you hear me okay? I'm going to get you to type a message. Today, we're going to be working on a project tracker. A project tracker helps you to report status and to show how progress is coming along. This is not full-blown project management. For project management, you really need project management software. Excel's not good at that. Excel doesn't really know how. It's very hard to do in Excel the idea of dependencies or predecessors and successors. Excuse me. But we can use Excel to keep track of status, how the project's doing, how's it performing to a plan, when it looks like it's going to complete. Abel, hi, thanks. Appreciate you letting me know you can hear me. Thanks for being here. So I'm going to show you now the project tracker that I've already used, and we're going to recreate something a lot like that. Let me share that. I'm going to share my whole screen. And we'll go over to Excel. There we go. So here's my project tracker. Pull that out of the way. And like all the dashboards and reports that I've created for you, fully automated. It follows that same two-step process. Bring in the latest data. That's the first step. And the second step is refresh your pivot tables. And everything you see on screen here will update automatically just after those two steps. So let me walk you through this real quickly because this is what we're going to be producing. So up here, you can see we've got the header, the title. It's got the date in it. This is the date of the most recent update. This is old data, but it shows both the date and what week number it is. Some parts of the world, they prefer a week number to track a project. Others, the date is fine, yeah. And then let's see, let's go over here. Here's the 10, is it 10? Yeah, 10 most recent weeks. You can see every row shows the performance that week. So this is a real good indicator of progress. It shows how the project has gone along for each of the last 10 weeks. Let's see, gives both the week number again and the date. And then here the overall progress, excuse me. It shows the percentage completion. And this is in my opinion, this is a pretty interesting topic. We'll get into, maybe not today, but task weighting. We'll talk about it today, but we won't actually be implementing it. That may take next week or even the week after, because that's a fairly sophisticated component. So there's the overall progress. And then here, based on the current progress, when does the project look like it's going to complete? So this is the forecast completion date. Yeah. And again, it also shows that by week. And then we have, here is the by region. So if you're doing a project, if you're in a mobile network, if you're doing a project that maybe the cell sites are spread over several regions, or if not regions, maybe it's base stations that are assigned to different engineers, or maybe you have different vendors. Perhaps you can break this up in many different ways. I chose region because it's pretty easy to understand, but the same technique, the same concept would apply for other ways to distribute the base stations across the network. So like I said, the assigned engineer, or maybe the vendor of the radio equipment. I've got region, lots of different ways you can cut this down depending on the project. Yeah, very simple to do actually. Okay, here we have the completion by task. And I will talk more about this. I'll wait until we get to that point, because we'll talk about that today. Here's the completion by task. Let's see. It shows the task right here across the top. Pad ready, installed, DC/AC, power, antennas, backhaul, tested and integrated and on air. Those are the tasks, the milestone tasks inside this particular project. And then here's a chart that shows by week as the progress is made in the project. Whoops, didn't want to do that. I wanted to move my. Here's a couple of other graphs: progress by region, overall progress for just the last several weeks. Something we'll watch out for is there's several different kinds of progress. So here we have regional progress, and you can see here that for the East region, it's almost to 70% complete. Yeah, but up here, the overall progress, the whole project is only 53% complete. So one region could be completely finished, but the project would not be finished. I think here's another look at that. The overall project is we're at 54%, even though that East region is almost to 70%. So we'll just have to keep track of that and be aware of what we're focusing on. And then this last graph over here is the sites in this project that are the least complete. It looks like I need a little more space because, yeah, there we go. So these are the site names, and these are the percentage completion. This XI in the South region is only 8% complete. So this is a heads up. This is what's going to hold the project back, these sites that aren't making progress. Okay, so let's go now. I'm going to go to my notes. Let's go now back to Excel. We're going to start with a more or less blank worksheet. And I have added a couple of worksheets to it. So this first one, as you know, I usually have a config. I thought I'd done more there. A config worksheet where I keep track of all the little like variables, global variables for the whole workbook. I'll put them here in this worksheet. That way, you only have to look to make changes in one location. I think I'm going to make a couple of quick changes here. I always like that. I usually don't use column A just because I like that space over there. Whoops, too much. And I'm going to set up. We'll get around to that. So what you see here on screen, though, is this is my site lookup. The site lookup is a way to index using a unique identifier for the site, such as a number, and using that number, which might be embedded in the data, and that will be the case for the project tracker, is people will report status by site ID. And here's the site name. So I'll be able to do a simple lookup. Given the site ID, I'll know what the name of the site is, because sometimes people prefer to work with a name rather than a number. And then here's the region. And depending on what you're tracking, if you wanted to, I gave the example before of instead of regional distribution, you might want to have engineer. So you could add the name of whoever's responsible for a given site. So maybe we have Abel's responsible for this site and this site and this site. And then maybe Russell is responsible for 3 sites and another site. And maybe Mary, she has a site. Couple of sites here. You can see the point. Now, the same way that I use the site ID to index a site name or a region, I can do it by a responsible party or maybe a vendor. Same thing. It's all in a lookup table, and we'll add that into our data in another step. So, in fact, I think we're about ready for that step. Let me check my notes. Well, my notes aren't very good. So there's the first lookup table. I think we'll do next is we're going to grab some data so we can see what the data looks like. And I did create a worksheet, but I haven't added any data. So I'm just going to grab some data here. So here's my data. Better make that bigger. There you go. That's 140%. Can you see that okay? So here's your data, and this is what is reported. This is an update. One row. It includes the site ID, the task, and when it was completed. Okay, site ID, task, and when it was completed. If you come back here, that's what I should have done first. Our task list. So you remember on this dashboard, this was our tasks, right? So I'm just going to take that. So there's our task list. Now, for the project you have, you can determine your task list. The task list is just this column B. Yeah, I'm going to skip that for now. Here's the list of tasks, and it's ordered alphabetical. That's not necessary, but I think most of us are comfortable to use like a VLOOKUP or HLOOKUP function in Excel. We're going to do that here in a bit. But to use a lookup function, what you're looking up, the array that you're looking into has to be sorted. Has to be sorted. There's another capability that takes 2 functions. It's called the index function and the match function. And normally people just talk about it almost like one word, index match. They work together. And if you use index match, you don't have to have the lookup sorted. Okay. I've also heard that index match is faster for a very large lookup array. I don't think that's going to be a problem for us, but it's just something to keep in mind. Index match is more flexible. Probably lookup functions are a little easier to think about. Okay, so here's the tasks that I've got in this particular project. I've got 9 tasks in my project. Freeze that top row. Yeah, I've got these 9 tasks. You can set whatever tasks for your project make sense. If you're doing different, this was to prepare a RAN upgrade to, we were getting ready to install an overlay network. And this was just preparing each site for that overlay network. So whatever you're doing, you can pick your task list. Now, I did have ordered tasks. So what was that? Sometimes you might want to display the task in a particular order. So that's what I did here. Here's my tasks. Here's the order of my tasks. I have to have them sorted so that the lookup function works, but I might want to know what order they would normally be done. Remember, it's Excel. I can't enforce this order. No one in the field that's actually doing this work is required to follow this order, but this is the order that kind of makes the most sense. Okay? And just so you know, once you've got your order set, now this will make sense. E2. So if I need, again, I can look up based on the task, but I might want to show the ordered task. We'll get to that a little bit later. And then for now, let's hold there. Let's go back and look at our data. Here was our data. Here's our data. And each one of these rows inside the data is a single task in one site on a specific date. This is the minimum information. Actually, you don't really need the date. There is a way to do this. It's quite possible in your network doing something like this. And if you don't have a project manager, you'll have engineers out in the field actually doing the work, and they need to report back into you or report into a project manager or a coordinator, maybe not a full-blown manager. Again, we're not using project management software, but there might be one person keeping track of the data inside this workbook. Maybe that's you, yeah? There's a way to do this so that all they have to provide is the site ID and the task they completed, and the date can be defaulted. Most people these days use a, which one? Did I not zoom that one? Sorry about that, Abel. This one, yeah. Sorry about that. There you go. So that's just the task list. There's the tasks. There's the order, the logical order. And here's just, it's just combining these two columns is all it is. You might need to use that. So back to the tasks. Most people these days, most companies use some type of messaging software like Microsoft Teams or WebEx Teams or Slack or Basecamp, Yahoo Messenger, Facebook Messenger. Not many companies use that, I suppose, but really there's lots of tools where people can communicate one-on-one. And if someone will report the data as they complete it, the messaging app will provide a timestamp. It's again something else we'll get to later. Let's keep going forward here. So thought I did that. I'm going to freeze that top row. Back at my dashboard, one of the key things is reporting by date, by week, and by date. Yeah. So this is really, once you've got a little bit of data in your workbook, here's our data, right? Now you can start, one of the first tasks you have to do is start setting up dates. So we're going to go back here to our config, and I always like to I told you that this workbook is a good place to store global variables that you use. Let me try that again. This worksheet, the config worksheet, is a good place to store variables that are global in the whole workbook, that influence other aspects of the report or the dashboard or the workbook. And so one of those is the start date. And the start date would either be entered here, so I always use the yellow color for entry. You can also, I'm not going to do that. We'll leave it like that. So here's your start date, and this would be, you can either type something in or the first date in your workbook. So let's do that. The first date would be the earliest date. Now, you remember, we've talked about this in earlier episodes. The way Excel tracks dates, here's your dates, right? If I unformat that, try again. Here's my dates, and you can see it's in month, day, year format. Yeah, myself, I usually prefer a format like this. Day, month, year. That's my preferred format. But the important thing here is Excel stores dates as the number of days since January 1, 1900. So it's just an integer, the number of days, the hours, minutes, seconds in the day. That's the decimal component of the, it's not an integer, it's a float, but the integer part is the count of days since January 1, 1900, and the hours, minutes, seconds is the decimal component of that figure. So if I make this just general, it's all numbers. It's just numbers. It's the number of days since January 1, 1900. So even if it's formatted as a date like this, under the hood, inside, Excel thinks it's a number. So the first date, the oldest date inside the workbook is the smallest number because it has the smallest number of days since January 1, 1900. So I know the earliest date by using the min function. Use the min function, click on date, and let's format that. There's the earliest date inside the project. 23, that's the first data. First task that was completed on 23 October of 18. That's good to know. We may use that later. That's the tasks. Yeah. Yeah. Often you can, I do. Always like to build in flexibility, right? Sorry, let me move this around here a little bit. Because that's actually a formula, I'm going to make it purple. That's just the color I use to flag a formula. And then if I had an official start date, I could type it in here. Here we go. So here's the earliest update. If I had an official start date, I could type that here. And what I want to use, I'm just going to call date start. The reason I start all these with the word date is you might end up with a lot of named ranges inside a project workbook like this. If all your dates begin with the word date, it's a little easier to find them inside the formula manager. Here's the name manager. And if you have, 30 different named ranges, it can be hard to find them because you might not know what to call them. But if you know you're looking for a date and you give them a name that begins with date, that's just a convention I use. For me, it makes it easier to catch up, find out what I'm doing. If I set the workbook aside for a few weeks, months, right, visit years from now, right? So that's why I do that. And I would make this a named range. So now you can see I have a named range called date start. Okay. And the formula here to use, if there's an override, if there's an official date, you want to use that. Otherwise, just use this earliest update. So that's an if function. If there's an override, equals if there's data in B3, use it. Otherwise, use B2. So let's say the start date, the boss said the start date was September 30th. Now the start date is the official date. So this is an automatic override. All I've done here with these 3 fields is I've built in the flexibility so that someone can set a start date. Maybe it's later. The first activity was 23 October, but maybe the project didn't start till 1 November. So I've just put it, this is just giving you flexibility, and the whole workbook is going to key off this named range. Why doesn't that should show start date right there? C. Oh, God damn it. Still didn't get it right, did I? I had I had the wrong cell selected when I gave the range a name. So I need to change that. It says C4. I want it to be B4. Sorry about that. So now if I click there, you can see up here, I'm sure that's hard for you to see, but that's the named range appears up there. Hard for you to see, I know. Okay, so now I've got a start date. let's check our, next we're going to do the same thing with the latest update. So and just like up here, the earliest update was the min function. The latest update is the max function. Once again, we'll look at that entire column. There we go. So the latest update, the most recent update, is just the maximum value in my date column. And I think it happens to be sorted by date. Sure, 28 January. 28 January. So the reason we do that is it's all automated. I don't have to, as soon as I paste in data, this will change. Now, just like we built in some flexibility up here, I'm going to do the same thing here. And this is going to be date used. Okay, there we go. So same thing. If I don't override, the way you'd use this override is, it's just kind of a, I've only used it a couple of times, but it's so easy to do. There's no reason not to. Let's say today's date is 28 January. And somebody said, wait, you're showing different data. 2 weeks ago, you said you were there. Well, 2 weeks ago would be 14 January. I've just overridden the latest date. This allows me, since everything in the workbook is going to key off this date, the date used named range, and I've just overridden it, I can show the dashboard for weeks, months in the past, exactly the way it looked at that time. I don't need to have a paper copy. I'm not destroying anything as time goes on. I'm simply changing the time frame at which I look at the data. That's all we do here. So it's easy. Like I said, I've only had to use this a couple of times, but it's so easy to do. I mean, we're done. So the next thing then, excuse me, I'm defining my variables. And one of the things we have to define is, if I go back to that dashboard, I want all the past weeks. I want them already calculated. I don't calculate them on the fly. So we're going to do that. And that's kind of a mess. Yeah. I think I'll definitely copy this because I'm lazy. I'm going to make a little more room for that. I like to keep a little room between, so I just don't accidentally overwrite something. Okay. So where do we start? I think this is our date. This is the table we're going to use to calculate weeks. I don't know why I don't have the date there. Yeah. And I'm going to add something in here. Again, I don't like to, I usually put a couple extra columns here so I don't overwrite. I'm going to add, didn't want to do that, date. So the date, I always want this to be the latest date. And we've done this before as well. We do this all the time, is I'm going to use this named range as the basis for the current date. So I want date, year, and now I want that named range. So my shortcut is function F3. Date used. There you go. I'm going to copy that so you can see it. So there's the function. It's just the date function, and I use the year, month, and day functions to pull out the year, month, and day of that value. So you can see I have an override here. If I get rid of my override, my date changes. This date is always going to be the same here, right? Let's go back and check our notes, shall we? What we're trying to do here is to create the days. It's actually different. Trying to create the weeks. This is really the week area. That's probably not named properly. This is really related to weeks. Yeah. This is recent weeks. And we're going to need another another named range, because the week num, we're going to use the week num. You see, we got all this stuff here related to the week num. It's a lot of work using week numbers. But once you have it set up, remember, it's all automated. So once everything is set up, it's all automated. That's important, but the setup is a bit of a hassle, mostly because weeks are odd. There's not a standard, how to say it. We have standard calendar for days, months, and years. Weeks are a bit of an exception in there, so it's a little extra work to work with weeks. To go back, and I think the starting point here, right? So I changed my mind about that. The starting point here is the week date, and we're going to start with the start date, or the date used, excuse me. Date used. And then, sorry, I got to go back and check this. Huh, interesting. All right, so multi-part process here. This is just going to be, we're going to arbitrarily say whatever the date is, and a week at a time is going to be, remember, we're looking back in the past, so we're going to start subtracting away weeks. So we have the date used, that's the first date of our week, and then we're going to subtract away 7 times 7 days, right? It's a day, it's a date, so we're using days. I'm not saying this very well, I'm confusing both of us. We use the rows function. And where are we in column K? Let me explain what we just did there. So this is a date that appears in the current week of the project. And I know that because let's save a step. Here's rows. So this is the rows function, and I've anchored the first term in the argument in the range. So as I fill down, rows simply returns the count of the number of rows in the argument. So here it's K2 to K2, that's 1 row, right? It's all row 2. So rows returns 1. What I want is for every week in the past, every row is a week. Every week in the past, I want to subtract away 1 additional week. I also like to keep the formulas all identical. And so to make them all identical, I need to subtract 1 away from this. That way, the first row here is always going to be the week of the current or of the date I'm using. So the date I'm using is date used. That's that one right there. And then I'm subtracting 1 times the number of rows. So in the first row, I want to have the date inside the current date. So I'm going to subtract away 0. But now, as I fill down, these are weeks in the past. So let's just do that. You can see we're jumping backwards in time 1 week at a time. So 31 December, 24 December, 17 December, 10 December. Okay, so there's a day in the week. This day will keep changing. How we normalize that is with the week number argument equals week. There's my date. And then the return type. So now you can see, I know that's small for you. Try it on your own. The week num function has an argument, and that argument determines, you have to read it. I usually, since different companies, different countries would use a different standard, this is called the return type value. That may vary by country. I would always set this up as an argument, as a named range. So let's take a break here. Go back and look here, and I've got it right there. It's my week num return type. So now when I do my week num, here's the function. It looks at this date, and I use my week num return type. Now, it's very easy to change if you come in here and if I didn't have an argument, Excel will show me that list. Now you can see which week num return type do we want. So calling it out separate like here is I don't have to edit my formulas. I just change this variable. So let's say it's a Friday, a 15. Really? 15? So there's my weeks. It's weird though, because look, I don't have a week one. Interesting, isn't it? Yeah, I took care of that. Like I said, week num are hard to work with, and we could spend a lot more time on this. The best way is going to be, I'll show you how I did it, and then you'll have to go through it yourself to make sure it's clear for you. Week numbers are a bit of a challenge. But I do want to keep going here. Probably we can make that go away. I used week num. Interesting. Something about 28 January. I'm just kind of checking. Why do we never get a week one? There we got a week one. So depending on where the date falls, that's one of the problems working with week num. Did I anticipate that? Yeah. Okay. This normalized week was just intended to, I may not need this anymore. Oh, I see what I did. If I go back to the default, see, I've got a 53 there. What I did was, if it's 53, change it. Change it to week one. And I don't know if that's really the right way to go here. if I3 equals J, yeah. See right there? So I arbitrarily converted 53 to 1. I just thought it looked better. Okay, so what we're building up here is we have what I would call the trailing weeks. If we come back to our dashboard, remember it's always showing the current week and then the previous 9 weeks. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, total of 10 weeks. The current week plus the 9 weeks before that. And to do that, we need to calculate these weeks in advance, which we've now done. We'll always take these first 10, and that will go into our dashboard. That's the date. Yeah, I display it as the year. I display it as the year and week. So if you come back here, equals I want to show the 4-digit year and then the 2-digit week num. This puts a dash between the two. And then I want here. But I want it to be a 2-digit, always to be a 2-digit week. So there's a single-digit week. So I can use the text argument, the text function. And that gives me a 2-digit week num. Right? So here on my brand new dashboard, it's going to be yeah, I just want 10 of them, right? So there's the beginning of my dashboard. So what we've done here is we've figured out, we've automated the process by which we determine what's the minimum date. We haven't used that yet, but the maximum date or the current date, that's what we've done. And we've created the year week values for for the whole project. Yeah. Going back quite a ways. And that's how we'll populate our dashboard with year and week. Yeah. This is going to take several weeks to put this together. This is the really hard part, is getting the dates right and getting it set up to start with. But this is all part of automation. Remember, where we're going is when this is completed, when the workbook is properly set up, we'll be able to update update the project, bring in the most recent project updates, and refresh the pivot tables, and all these charts, all these numbers will update automatically. We're going to do the work up front to get that automated dashboard, because that's what's going to be, that's going to save your time, and that's going to impress the people. It's really great that you can update this in about 20 seconds. Once it's completed, bringing in the latest data, refreshing the pivot table, it takes 20 seconds. It's really easy. So that's why it's worthwhile to do this work up front, to have something like this, and the whole thing everything just flows when you update it. Okay, I'm going to make a break for that today. Next week, we'll pick up with overall progress, and that involves task weighting. We'll start with that. I'm not sure exactly how long that will take. There's a couple things I wanted to share with you, though. Abel, it's only you, so I'm going to just talk at you, I think. We're having a webinar next Saturday. It's a free webinar, 5G and network slicing. Here's the information about it. You can just follow this link and it'll give you more information, right? It's free, so you can read the link. If if you click the link, you're not going to be forced to do anything. It's still up to you. That's next Saturday at 4 p.m. UTC. You already know, if you would please follow me on LinkedIn, follow the Intellify company on LinkedIn. That's where I do most of my updates, so that you can see what's going on. What else I'd tell you about? Of course, you already know about this. If you want to get a little email before I go live, follow this link. You'll have to give me your email address, but then every week before I go live, I'll send out an email. And after we do the work, I can send you a workbook, the workbook that we've worked on together here during the show, during the episode. Okay. Thanks so much for being with me. Have a great week. We'll see you again next week on Saturday for 5G and network slicing, and then again for standard operating procedure next Sunday. Bye-bye. Have a great week.